Uh, Pastor Manoj asked me to talk about art. Art, and he didn't tell me anything else. He didn't give me Hunduke. I was thinking, this is a week before Christmas, and I'm going to talk about art, And the unification thought talks about, has many theories, and one of the theories is the theory of art. And I was thinking, how is this going to, how am I going to tie this in with Jesus' birthday? And how do I talk about the right way to do art, in a 20-minute Sunday sermon? But then I just thought, well, God is working through Pastor Manoj, and so I'm just going to have to, go roll with this, right? So I did. And the thing is, and then I got really excited because stuff started to come. And I want to share a little bit with you this morning. It's not going to be about the unification thought theory of art. It's going to be, see, the unification thought starts with God. And the theory of art starts with the way God creates. And so that is what led me to what I'm going to say this morning. I just read, these two passages. Jesus encouraging us to be perfect. That's the main point of the first one. Each one of us is to be perfect. And then the unification thought, and of course all of this comes from Father's talks. If one lives the way each day to its fullest, expressing our creativity in everything we do, the footprints of that day become a work of art. And the footprints of our entire life become a work of art. So I wanted to start with that. And I wanted to start with the reason, the greatest artist. Who's the greatest artist, right? The first and the greatest. Obviously, who is it? God, right. And this is what this is what unification thought points out. It says that the reason God created, because God is a God of heart. And heart needs an object to love, to have a relationship with. It needs it. And I wanted to just pull up this definition of heart that comes, once again, from unification thought. It says, heart is the core of God's sung-song, of God's mind, spirit. It's defined, heart is defined as the emotional impulse to seek joy through love. This is the most fundamental part of God. We're used to thinking of an all-powerful God, an all-knowing God, an all-just God, and all these kinds of things. But Father Moon says, okay, those things are all true. But even more than that, the most fundamental thing of all is that God has an emotional impulse to seek joy through love. That's the most essential thing about God. And it goes on to describe this. Let me explain the concept of an emotional impulse. An emotional impulse is the irrepressible desire that wells up from within us. It's an irrepressible desire. Normal desires might be repressed through one's will, but an emotional impulse cannot be repressed. An emotional impulse cannot be repressed. God possesses heart, or the emotional impulse to seek joy through love. And such an impulse of God was far more irrepressible than that of human beings. However incomplete, in God, this emotional impulse to seek love is stronger than the impulse to seek joy. God's heart can also be expressed as the emotional impulse to love infinitely. I'm not trying to get cerebral on you, all these thoughts. But the point I'm just trying to really want to start with about Heavenly Parent is that Heavenly Parent, the most fundamental thing about Heavenly Parent is Heavenly Parent has an irrepressible inner impulse to seek love. And then the joy comes from that. That's the most fundamental thing to know about Heavenly Parent. Love of God is an irrepressible impulse, and therefore an object partner of love was absolutely necessary for God. Thus, creation was necessary, inevitable, and can never be considered as merely accidental, which is what we usually pick up from school. That the creation is a result of many, many coincidences, remarkable, but coincidence nevertheless. But what Father Moon is saying here is that this creation came about, it had to exist. It had to. Why? Because the Heavenly Parent has no choice, cannot repress this desire for an object to have to relate to give love to, and to receive love back from. So that's what I wanted to explain then about, okay, so now we've established that the creation had to come into being. It had to come into existence. Now here's a thing that even as many times as I talk about it, and maybe many of you in this room have heard me say this before, but Father Moon has a very interesting explanation of how this universe came into existence. So let's look at this, right? And it says it here in Unification Thought that the original individual image, the original idea in the mind of God before the creation of the universe was none other than the image of Adam himself. And this image was not vague, it was not abstract, it was very specific and very concrete. It had a spiritual aspect and a physical aspect. It means that Adam's character and appearance also were included in the original individual image. So here we're being told that before the creation of the universe, the very first idea that God had to create was not the Big Bang and the cosmos and all the laws of chemistry and physics and light and gravity that God invented. But because God had an irrepressible inner impulse to experience joy through love and through many things that you study, you know that in order to receive love, you have to have resemblance. And there's many things in the scriptures, in Father Moon's speeches, that explain that when he wanted something to resemble him, he wasn't thinking of the dinosaurs and he wasn't thinking of the Milky Way galaxy. He was thinking of a young man and a young woman who were not inferior to him in any way. He was thinking of a young man and woman who had creativity, who had intellect, who had amazing capacity, who had senses of humor, who had interests, who had hobbies. Someone that Heavenly Parent could relate to, not as a pet, not as a servant, but, and this is Father Moon's words, as an equal. But that's where the most joy comes from, when you have someone to relate to who's not beneath you, but who's stimulating, who's curious, who's alive and even can challenge you in some ways. That's the most rewarding relationship. So what this is saying is that the very first image in the mind of God before the creation was not the laws of the universe. It was this one young fella. And this guy was designed very specifically, very concretely, the way he looked and the way his character and personality were. Very specific, not abstract, not the human race, but an individual this tells me that Heavenly Parent, he knew the color of this young man's eyes. He knew the shape of this young man's ears. He knew the young man's, he knew the complexion, he knew the shape of everything from top to bottom. And inside too was designed. This is not my revelation and my inspiration, it's what Father Moon taught us. And then Unification Thought explains then he created a girl in also, very specifically. Very, very specifically. Also, he knew her hair color, he knew the shape of her hips, he knew everything about this woman, this young lady. And then Unification Thought goes on to say that Heavenly Parent then, after he got the idea for this young man and this young woman, next, God subtracted certain qualities and elements from the conception of human being and transformed it, whereby he created the conception of the animals. Then he subtracted certain qualities and elements from the concept of animals and transformed it and created the concept of the various plants. And then he subtracted certain qualities and elements from the conception of the plant and transformed it, whereby he developed the conception of the various heavenly bodies and the minerals. So this is something you don't hear in school. You know? We hear that the Big Bang happened, and after that, everything unfolded, and just these amazing coincidences arrive at the universe we have. What Father Moon is saying here is the Big Bang was the initiation of building a blueprint, an idea, a whole universe that was already created within the mind of God before the Big Bang, based on these two young people who would be his delight and his joy and everything, that his whole world. Do you understand what I'm saying? Come on, I prayed, and Heavenly Parent, art. Heavenly Parent would like you to get this, because it's all about love. All right? So this is called the downward process. Heavenly Parent creates this young fella, this young girl in his mind, very clearly what they look like and what they are like. Simplifies, creates the animals. Simplifies, creates the plants. Simplifies, creates the minerals. And now, man, we're leaving out. He invented gravity. He invented nuclear fission. He invented all of this stuff, evaporation. I mean, how do you build this whole thing? It was all designed, And so then, with this blueprint, then the Big Bang happens. Big boom, and then from this one infinitesimally small place in the universe, physical universe, all this energy goes out, and all the gases, and it took 15 to 16 billion years for us to arrive at this. And after 15 to 16 billion years, there's the appearance of a young man and a young woman. Now, this is another thing that Father Moon says about that, and it's, if God had been thinking only about himself, would have he created heaven and earth? Creation requires an investment of energy. An artist's great hope is to create a masterpiece. An artist invests all of his effort into making great works of art. A masterpiece only appears when an artist gives everything and he can't give any more. He can't give any more. He's exhausted. According to the principle that a perfect object appears only through total investment, God as the subject completely invested himself into making his object partner. Some people think that when God created through the word saying, let there be this, let there be that, it was like a game, but no. God completely poured out his true life, his true love, and true ideals. We don't love something unless we have worked hard and invested our flesh and blood into it. And that's what Father Moon explains about how all of this came into existence. It wasn't, let there be light, and boom, there it was. What does it take to get light? You got to invent suns, You got to invent how they work. You got to invent how light can be transmitted. Then you have to figure out how human beings have the capacity to feel the warmth, how they can see the light, they can see the colors. Color was invented, All of this stuff, flavors, fragrances, all of this stuff was invented. Yeah? So, all right, so 15 to 16 billion, we arrive at what we have now. So that's art. That is art. That's art. So I would like, I mean, we have a beautiful, beautiful, Sunday today, autumn. Look at the leaves, for crying out loud. That was designed. All of those colors on those trees were designed because of love for us. All of that stuff. So then I wanted to, then what do we give back? All right, so I want to talk about, okay, all of this is Heavenly Parent's masterpiece. I want to give back. So Matthew says, be perfect is what he says. Right? And that's where the Hunduke is from. And then this is what Father Moon said. If I live to my best ability, being creative as God is creative, every single day of my life, then that day becomes a work of art. And if I live well, then my life becomes a work of art. I remember Father Moon telling us, I was sitting in the room, he said, your life is like a movie. Don't make a boring movie. Maybe some of you were there when he said that, right? So then I looked up art, and this came up. The highest, sweetest love shared by a husband and wife must become the most sublime work of art in the world. The life of a husband and wife should inspire the most sublime work of literature. So your love should want to make people write songs and make movies, looking at you. That's what that means, Your love for each other should make people want to look, oh man, I want that. I need to write a movie about that, about them. That's what this is, It should be. So, marriage blessing. First, this is, a husband and wife each should originally represent each one of God's dual characteristics. The man representing yang, the woman representing yin. So, their coming together signifies the manifestation of God. That's how you see God. You see God when this young guy, like you, young guy like you, connect to God, and a young lady like you connect to God, and then the two of you are together. That's how you see God. That's the idea. That's the idea. Then, in conclusion, then what do I do? We say this thing. Our family, the owner of Cheongil-guk, pledges to perfect the four great realms of heart, which is, it happens in a three-generation family, the realm of the royal family, centering on true love. Royal family doesn't mean the lineage of Father and Mother Moon. It means the whole human race. Look it up. The royal family is the whole human race restored, right? So then I would say that this is the offering for all that I've been given, for all the art that surrounds me in my life. I mean, look at this. This is okay. Okay, that has a, that was, for all of that, all of that art, and I'm going to have brunch pretty soon, and that art, man, look at the peppers and ham and eggs. I mean, that's all invented, So for all of that, then what can I do? I can make my life a work of art. I can make my marriage a work of art, and I can touch the lives of the people that I know, especially my physical family. That's what hometown is about. That's what tribe is about. You understand? Got it? That's it.